Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ananke Literature Festival at the Reverie panel. Very excited to talk to our panelists today. My name is Safinah Elahi. I am a novelist and the founder of Reverie Publishers. With us is Moni, who is an award-winning author of 3 novels. She's also published 3 collections of her popular satirical column, The Diary of a Social Butterfly. She now lives in the UK and is currently writing a novel about South Asian diaspora in London. Also with us is Osman Haneef. He's the author of several short stories and the novel The Verdict, which has won the UBL Literary Award. He studied creative writing at Yale, Stanford, Colby, Curtis Brown Creative, and the Faber Academy. And with us is Saeed. He's the author of the novels Little America, winner of the KLF Fiction Award and the Year of Sound and Heat. He earned his MFA from the University of Texas at Austin and currently teaches literature and creative writing at Habib University. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. You can all unmute yourselves.
Thank you.
Thanks, Safinah. Good to see you.
Good to see you all as well. So I'd like to start. All of us, all of you guys are established writers. And I think at the time when Reverie did approach you, you had already, written your novels. So it wasn't really me commissioning the novels; they were already out there, and we basically bought rights. But would you like to talk a little bit about how the connection came about and the work that you published with Reverie? And we can start with you, Osman, because you were the debut sort of novelist that came with Reverie.
Right. No, absolutely. So I actually had to go back and look and sort of reread some of the old messages that we sort of exchanged. But essentially, the book had come out in India under a different title with Reader Mania before. And there was a book ban, if you all remember this. So no author who had any books published in India could get them sort of sold in Pakistan. So we were also, I think, scrambling to find local publishers, and because of the topic, I think, and the topic and theme of the book and the issues it addressed, I think a lot of sort of traditional publishers were a bit nervous and uncertain about it. But I mean, I remember we have a mutual sort of first connection, I guess now a friend, but at that time, really someone who just sort of reading the book and thought it was really enjoyed it, reviewed it, and I think sort of passed that information on to you. And then you sort of reached out to me when sort of very casually, so are you talking to any Pakistani publishers? I was like, you clearly talk to this person. Yes, and yes, I am. And I think my concern when I look back, it was I really felt it was important for it to be sort of in the hands of sort of readers, and so I was concerned, I think, about distribution with such an early publisher. I think you did a lot to allay my concerns. Also, I mean, Moni might not remember this, but we met long before that. I think I'd always been wondering about, should you be concerned about this publisher, that publisher? And you said, your book eventually finds its readers. Like you just have to get out there, and eventually people sort of find them out. So, anyways, I'm sort of delighted that I did sign Reverie, because I think after seeing sort of what we were able to do with the book versus what was generally there in Pakistan, I think it was really remarkable. And I think we got into sort of the bookstores we wanted to go to. I think we had a lot of really good events for it, and a lot of sort of I think it was I don't want this to be a sort of mutual admiration society, so I'll stop.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this panel is not about how great.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just,
but I think, I mean, I was very glad that I went with Reverie, and I think that's sort of the story as to how it happened.
Moni, would you like to share your experience?
I will second everything that Osman has said. This was the silver lining in the big black cloud of trade bans with India. particularly affecting books and the work of all creators. I have also, and I also second everything that Osman said. I was also very lucky in the timing of my book when it came out, in that literary festivals were about to happen. You launched it in Lahore, but then at the Karachi Literary Festival, we were able to capitalize on that, and that gave the book quite a lot of uplift, I felt. So that was all good. One thing I felt with the publishing industry, not just with Reverie, is that we don't just need publishers. We also need everything else which goes around with it. So we need good proofreaders. We need good book designers. We need cover designers. We need good copywriters at the back, copy editors. We need very good reviewers. And once all of that is in place, I think the publishing industry will be all the stronger for it. But these are very good and important starting steps. I, for one, enjoyed the process of working very closely with the designer, with the cover designer. I had not had so much input in the past in the UK. I had some in India, but in the UK, you just don't have any input unless you are a sort of huge seller or whatever. So this was a great experience. Also discovered some very interesting graphic artists working in Pakistan, and it was very rewarding.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Moni. Zain, would you like to add something?
Yep, very similar experience. Trade ban happened, book got published in India, and then I was like, when is it coming? When is it coming? When is it coming? Never showed up. And so eventually what I started doing, because I'd just gotten back, I think from the US at that point, I'm not sure. The timelines are a little skewed, but I was just kind of very quickly looking up, who's putting books out in Pakistan, what's happening. And then for some strange, not for some strange reason, for a very good reason, Osman's book just kept coming up. There was like reviews of Osman's book and pictures of Osman's book. And I was like, and everything else that I tried to find, like whenever I Googled someone else's book that had been published by one of the other publishers, you'd probably see one review, you'd see one blog post, and then you wouldn't see anything at all. So I think when that started happening, I was like, okay, who's put this book out? Because this is clearly a publisher that is not just, a printer, because I think that's what a lot of publishers in Pakistan end up being. They just print out the book, they put it in a store, and then it's dead. So that was kind of something that really appealed to me. And then I was like, okay, so let me just reach out to who this person is. And now we're here. So that's really what happened.
And all of your books have done so well. I mean, they've been received so well by the readers in Pakistan, because I think essentially your books have been for Pakistani readers, and it's a shame that it wasn't done from here initially, and we don't have big publishing houses in Pakistan. But it's been so heartwarming. When I was with Moni as well, there were people who were coming up to her, again and again at festivals, and the kind of star power that she had was just brilliant. So Moni, let's start the next question with you. I know that you were doing a column with the Friday Times that turned into, the Diary of a Social Butterfly. But did you always know that you wanted to be a writer when you were younger or in your college days?
Not at all. Not at all. When I was offered a job at Friday Times, I turned it down. I said, I don't know how to write and I can't write, and please forgive me and find somebody else. My editor, who also happened to be my brother-in-law, was Najam Sethi, was very, very enabling in all of this. And he said, well, I think you can write. So why don't you I said, all I've ever written are college essays. I've not done any creative writing course. I've never done any journalism course. I don't know anything. So he said, well, just throw yourself in and start and see what happens. And I will give you one assurance, which is that I will not publish anything that you are not entirely happy with. We'll edit it together. We'll see how it goes. And then if you're happy, we'll publish it. And that's how it started for me. And the column also had a very organic kind of life. It began as something else, and then it morphed into the Diary of a Social Butterfly. And you don't know what you can do until you start doing it. And for me, working in the Friday Times was a period of apprenticeship, and I was very fortunate. And not everybody has that. I had a good editor, and I had an audience who were very forgiving, or a readership which was very forgiving. And I made lots of mistakes in the beginning. Now, when I read those early articles, etc., I think, oh my God, how could I have written this? But it gave me a period of 10 years in which I was just writing and writing and writing and writing. And that is at the heart of every enterprise, the practice. I was lucky I found a way in. So a lot of luck, and a lot of kindness along the way.
And hard work.
Yeah. If you enjoy it, it's not hard work. Having said that, writing novels is always hard work. Even if you're enjoying it, it's so painful.
I think the editing process is just it's just all pain. Osman, would you like to add, since you've done several creative writing courses, and I also know that your novel was written in over a span of many years.
Yeah, embarrassingly long time, as I say. No, I think I've done a lot of creative writing courses, but I don't know if I ever, and those are all courses that I sort of carved out in a course that was somewhat more practical, because like any good South Asian child, I think I was conflicted about what I really wanted to do versus what was actually going to sort of pay the bills. And maybe that's the story of all writers to some extent. But I think, look, I think we all have this tendency to want to tell stories as children, right? To be sort of storytellers, to naturally sort of, I think, but then sort of disguised from doing it, but they're told not to be sort of exaggerate or lie, whatever it is, as much. And so I think that the difference is really, I never sort of grew out of that sort of tendency to want to tell these stories. And I don't know if I ever thought I could actually, I don't think there was a light bulb moment where I was like, oh, I think I could write a novel, maybe write, a series of novels, or become sort of a writer. I think it was just something that I felt better, during my week. My week felt better if I could get some writing done. I think I probably, it was just something that was, that naturally, I guess, brings me sort of joy. So I think that's really been, in terms of the development, though, yes, I think those courses have, I think, sort of sharpened my prose, but more than just sort of writing, also helped me to sort of learn or think about editing, right? And think about the reader and what you're sort of delivering to them, and all the bits of craft that really go into developing as a writer. So when did I sort of know about it? I don't think there was a particular moment, although I do think the early sort of validation from getting sort of positive feedback, or, winning sort of college competitions and things like that, that was, I think, what sort of made me feel like, okay, actually, maybe I have some ability or talent in this area as well. But I don't think there was a single, epiphany or moment that I could really point to, which makes for a less compelling story. So I'm sorry, but
no, it's interesting nonetheless. Zain, you've earned your MFA. You're also a musician, so you must have had some kind of epiphany that you wanted to go, become a writer.
Epiphany, yes, but I think it was mostly boredom. I was like doing a graduate degree in linguistics in Germany. I remember this very, very clearly. And I was so bored. Because I hated everything I was doing. So I just started writing. Like, I'd taken a couple of writing classes at LUMS before with Bilal Tanveer when I was studying there. And even then, it wasn't because I wanted to do it. It was mostly because, like most undergrads, you're like, oh my God, I'm getting a grade for writing stories. That is amazing. I can just do that now. So I started doing that. And then, so in Germany, I just started writing. And eventually, because I was so bored, I started sending the writing out to places. And again, this wasn't like someone was telling me how to do it or what to do. It was literally just me in Google for hours saying, okay, where do people send stories? Where do people, who publishes them? Who pays? Because that was something I was really fascinated by. I was like, people pay for stories? Okay, let's find out. So yeah, a story got picked up then in this magazine called Glimmer Train, and that came with a paycheck which actually paid rent for 1 month, and that blew my mind. That was like, oh my God, why are you paying me for this? First of all, because I was like, this was entirely just fun. This was fun. This was something I was doing because I wanted to do it. So compared to, as I think Osman mentioned, in the kind of South Asian boys mindset where like, okay, money equals job, you need to get a proper job and you need to get all this. And I was like, what is this? How have I paid rent with a stupid story that I wrote? And that kind of just got me writing. And then eventually I ran into this one American writer who was visiting my city in Germany at that point in time. He's like, what are you doing? I'll just kind of write you recommendations if you want, and then just apply to these programs and we'll see what happens. And then, yeah, that's how the MFA came about, because I just met this guy. So it's just been a series of accidents, mostly caused by boredom. But yeah, I suppose that's how it works. The MFA itself didn't really help much. I mean, I keep telling people the MFA is just one of those things where you have to be a particular kind of person to get something from it. For me, it was mostly just time to write and kind of validation that said, okay, you can be in this group. But yeah, I think for me it was mostly just boredom and a series of accidents that brought me here.
Good accidents.
Good accidents.
Good accidents. So coming towards sort of South Asian and Pakistani fiction, South Asian fiction has had a glorious year with Shahan Karunathilaka winning the Booker, Gitanjali and Daisy Rockwell, getting the international Booker, and suddenly, this region has come center stage. And I know that, all three of you must have interacted with young writers. Is there a particular line of writing they're following? And what do you think young writers should be writing about? We can start with you, Moni.
I haven't come up, some writers have reached out to me, but I haven't read a lot of work. So I must say at the outset that I don't know very much about that. But I am very hesitant to tell people what they should write about. I think everybody must write what they feel is what they want to say. The only thing I would say is that, in fact, if I have to give any advice, it would be to follow your own instinct, to follow your own joy, to write what you really enjoy, because that is the way that you reach out to people, because joy is infectious. And I think the one thing I would say, however, is don't follow trends. Don't try. You see that something is, I remember reading so many sort of Arundhati wannabe writings before, and I felt that it wasn't really themselves speaking. And whenever you heard the actual voice, it was so compelling. So I would just say, try and find your own voice. I know it's very difficult. I know it's a very vague thing to say to people. It's a very frustrating thing. But write what you, not even necessarily what you know, but what you really wanted to write about. And something will come from it. And just be prepared to give it a lot of time. It doesn't come immediately. It comes with effort, it comes with time, and it comes after a lot of mistakes. As Zain was saying, accidents, they're happy accidents, which sometimes lead to great results. And I would also say that the most painful thing here is perseverance. It takes a long time, and it takes a lot of effort. And there is this kind of weird idea that people have, two ideas. One is that it will come to you while you're doing something else, or sometimes there's a flash of inspiration, but a whole novel doesn't come to you. A whole short story doesn't come to you complete, an idea may come to you. What really, it comes when you're sitting and working and working and working and trying and trying and trying and trying, and eventually something will come. And the second thought that I have is that people often feel that, unlike music, or unlike art, which require or maybe art is not, but music maybe most of all, that there's a specific discipline which is associated with it. And writing, in fact, is something that everybody can do anytime they feel like. Writing itself is also a discipline, and you have to learn the craft. There's a craft involved. And as Zain was saying, it's not necessary that you find that craft in an MFA, but you do have to find it. That's my 2 bits worth.
Thank you, thank you. Zain, you, I know for a fact, interact with a lot of writers, and at the university you teach at, and I know that, you know, many people come to you and ask for inspiration and, you know, how to go about things. Would you like to add, you know, because we've had this discussion where we spoke about, you know, Pakistani writing about being partition and bombing, and all of that is obviously very important. But
Yeah, so that is my job, interacting with young writers. I meet, excuse me, I think I probably run into about 30 of them every semester, like 30 new faces every semester. For some strange reason, young people want to write. I don't know what, it's usually, I try to figure out why do you want to write over the course of the semester, and I can't, I still haven't, but I'm very glad that they want to write. But I think it does come from a place of just them wanting to communicate. I think at the end of the day, I think social media has brought out this kind of desire to tell your story, and I think they're just looking for better ways to do that. So I mean, when they come, sorry, your question was, what do they write about first?
what do they write about, or what do you think they should write about?
So when they come to class, right? So the first thing they write about is inevitably a story with some Elizabeth or George somewhere in New York. That's inevitably how they start. I don't know, I mean, we know why, but I think 8 out of 10 students will begin there. They will begin with stories they've seen on TV. They'll begin with stories they've read in books. They'll try to emulate that, change that around somehow. And over the course of the classes that I teach, the idea is always, okay, what, maybe that's not you who should be writing those stories. Maybe there are other stories that you could write better, you could tell better. So eventually over the course of the semester, they start writing stories about this place, about, you know, the people here and about the people they know. And obviously their writing improves significantly because now they're writing from what they know, from what people around them know, from what they've seen, from what they've experienced, from what they've just lived, essentially. So that begins to happen. But even then, you know, first, as you mentioned, you know, it starts with partition. They're like, yep, let's talk about the things that everyone's talked about. Let's talk about partition. Let's talk about terrorism. Let's talk about politics and bombings and gunmen. And there's always a murder. There's always a mugging. There's always one of those things. And obviously they're part of life, but they're not the only kind of representative experience of this place, of this city, of this country. So again, then over, you know, a couple of courses, eventually I think they understand that those aren't the only stories that they can tell, that they can tell stories about, you know, a playground. They can tell stories about a musician in Karachi. I recently read a story about a mermaid on Kimari, or something of the sort. So it's always, you know, it's a process where you kind of unlearn the things you've learned growing up, unlearn the stories you've learned, and then, you know, just try and write your, I hate this phrase, like, your truth, but it is like you start writing like your stories. And that is, I think, for me, the most satisfying thing about my job.
Excellent. Osman?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just echo what Moni and Zain have said. I think Zain probably out of the three of us encounters far more young writers than than we do. But I think the key is to write from their own experience, not necessarily just write what they know, as Moni said, but write perhaps what they're curious about, but have it be informed or grounded in their own reality, or something they know well, because that, I think, it gives that sense of authenticity or truth to the realness to anything you write, if it's grounded in something that's very tangible and real. And I think that also lends itself to giving the author a unique voice, because they are writing from their own sort of from their own experience, but stretching that a bit to sort of to write about the other things they're curious about. But you know, I think that's, I think the big thing. Oh, sorry, I don't know why the video went out. I think the big challenge is, or is that it's actually a lot of hard work, and most people don't get there because they're not sitting down and just writing. So I think, you know, I think there's a lot of sometimes people like the idea of having written a book, but not necessarily the work of sitting down every day, you know, sort of and writing. There's that you know famous quote that's, I don't know, it's assigned to many people, but writing is easy. You just like, you know, open a vein and bleed on the page kind of thing. It's like but really it's just, I think for young writers, I think beyond just sort of, oh, you know, finding your voice or trying to write authentically, write from your own experience, I would say just write, like just make it sort of a dedicated practice, because it's you know, as Moni said, it is a discipline. And I think that's the only way you're really going to get somewhere, is if you sort of give it sort of the dedication and commitment it needs to actually for you to succeed. So that'll be my sort of 2 cents.
So coming towards picking from, you know, what all three of you said, that, you know, the writer should write about their truth and their story. But what about writing from the opposite sex, writing the not self? Because, you know, at some point, writers do experiment with different voices that is not their own lived experience. So I'll ask a 2-part question. How is it writing the not self? Because obviously the protagonists in your story are not necessarily exactly like you. There may be, you know, surrounding characters or situations that you might have encountered. But at the end of the day, it is, you know, fiction. And the second part of the question would be, what makes a good novel? So we can start with you, Osman, so you don't have to wait out, you know.
No. I mean, so I'll just go with sort of your first question. I think I think there's like a sort of huge moment right now in publishing where there's this question about who has a right to tell which story. And I think it's, you know, it's an awkward thing for authors, because I mean, as you say, like we inhabit different characters, you know, different genders, different sort of classes, usually in our writing. And so it'd be very boring if I was only writing from a perspective that was exactly or a character was identical to me. You know, yet at the same time, we do want to sort of you know, celebrate or empower, make sure that we're not just sort of, it's not sort of, say, a lot of, you know, white people writing about South Asian characters that are sort of celebrated, for instance. I mean, that's sort of something we want to avoid. So, but just, you know, that's a broad sort of comment on the question. But in terms of how one does it, I think, you know, as with any character, I think the key is to making sure that you sort of that they're 3-dimensional, right? That you don't sort of create sort of a stereotype carbon cutout of the other. And then also, I mean, I don't know how the others feel about this, but for me, I think it's often important also to have a sort of a diverse group of alpha readers, so that if you have inevitably missed something, you know, or you're perhaps not looking at it carefully enough, if something doesn't ring true, having that sort of those people sort of giving you that feedback. And, you know, just in terms of, yeah, it's something as simple as this feels off can often be really valuable when you're going through early drafts. And again, this goes back to the earlier point about, yeah, it's work. You know, you're not going to get the perfect sort of thing on the first go, but having someone say, this doesn't feel right is invaluable as a writer. So that would be sort of how I would approach it. And I think we can come back to maybe what great, you know, works are.
What makes a good novel? Okay, we'll do another round of that. Moni?
Sorry, you know, I lost you all in between and I had to go off. I don't know what happened. So I had to reconnect. I didn't hear what Osman said, therefore, and I'm sorry if I'm going to repeat what he said.
That's okay.
This idea about, who can write what and whether we can write about people that we don't know ourselves or people from different classes or people of different races. I'm very conflicted about this because on the one hand, I know that, our stories have been told by other people, or we have been told to tell stories in a particular way. And even as late as 2021, in January, just before the George Floyd, just before George murder, and the start of Black Lives Matter, I met with with a British publisher, and I had written a funny novel. In fact, I had written a satirical novel, which you published afterwards, which is the Impeccable Integrity Ruby R. And I gave it to her, and she had been my publisher before, and she said to me that people don't want funny stories from South Asia. They want stories about deep events. She said, deep things, engaged very deeply, dark things, engaged with, and that kind of was offensive at that time. But I just I think as long as you do it actively, as long as you try and get under the skin of someone, I know again it's easier said than done, and as long as you don't presume to speak for other people, I think you can and should write from a variety of viewpoints. Also because it's very boring for the reader if you write just the one thing over and over and over again, which is just you and your life, etc. After all, fiction is about your engaging your imaginative power, both as a reader and as a writer. So yeah, I think, as long as you do it sensitively, as long as you do it carefully, as long as you do it after a little bit of thought and research, go for it.
Definitely. Zain?
I have a cop out. I don't think you can think about all of this while you're actually writing. So I think if you're actively engaged in thinking about this while you are writing a story, you will never write anything because you will never make everyone happy. I don't think that will ever happen. I completely agree with Osman. I think it's essential to have readers for your work after you've written something, so that, and a diverse group at that. So if there's something there that is actually, something that will stand out or something that shouldn't be there, I think that's something you can then consider at that point. But at the end of the day, I don't think it is possible to say that if you are a writer from X, all your stories should be about people from X and about, I don't think that'll work. It's something that, again, I think I haven't really done that before, written about other people till this thing that I just finished recently. And it took me a very, very long time it's the longest anything has ever taken for me, right? Because of this reason, because I think when I started writing about 3 or 4 years ago, I got so bogged down by this question about, okay, so one of these people is German. And they're like, how do I write German? Eventually realize that Germans are also people. And so you're writing a people story, a story about people. So yeah, it took me a few years of just letting that story rest in my Dropbox or whatever it was. And just kind of realizing, okay, I don't think that is a question that needs to be addressed right now. I think your goal and your duty as a writer, I think, is to write a character as accurately and by accurately, I mean as generously and as extensively as possible. Like, you're trying to portray the human experience. And I think if you do that, it should be good. I think it should be good. I can't really answer the question of whether you should or shouldn't, because I think you have to.
You have to. I mean, at some point you'll have to. Zain, would you like to start with what makes a good novel?
Okay, that's the easiest question today. No, I don't know what makes a good novel. For me, it is novels that, or any story really that makes me feel something is for me the best thing. And by feel something, I mean feel something strongly. Like, there's probably only a handful of novels or stories that I've read that I might not remember what happened. I might not remember who did what or who the characters were, but I remember very, very distinctly how they made me feel once I finished reading it. And that was a kind of a deep, quote unquote, life-changing sort of feeling or experience. So for me, that is really, for me, what a great story or a great novel is something that makes me feel something very deeply. Because now more than ever, I think because of the MFA industrial complex and everything else that's happening in the world, a lot of stories are being produced where, you know, linguistic gymnastics kind of takes over from, you know, what really a story is, you know, which is heart. And I think you kind of lose heart in a lot of these stories that, you know, you read now. So for me, when I find that heart in a story or in a novel, that for me just takes the cake. That is my best novel.
Moni, would you like to add what for you makes a good novel as a reader, as a writer?
As a writer, I'm not one to judge. That's for other people to say. I agree with what Zain was saying. It has to be something which stays with you, which makes you, which makes you feel something, which makes you, which engages your interest as well. But for me, a good novel can also be something like, for example, it's not a novel, it's a television series, but a very well-written television series, which is Succession. And my son is very keen on it. I find all the characters so very repulsive that I can't get behind anybody in it. And therefore, I don't care what happens to them. And so I can't. But I, at the same time, I'm aware of the fact that the writing is fantastic. The production values are very high. The acting is great. Same with books. Sometimes you read a novel and you can tell that it's a great novel, even though it doesn't appeal to you that much. It's not your thing, but it's a great novel. So Everybody Holds Up War and Peace. I wasn't moved by it, I have to say. And I read it during COVID, and I hesitated to say to people before, I don't know what the fuss is about. I also, but I loved Anna Karenina. I thought that was a great, great novel. So different things, I think, and so much depends on who you are and what appeals to you as well. I love reading humorous novels. I think it's, if you find one and makes you chuckle, it's great. I love novels which are set in places I don't know much about. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a great novel, but for me, it's an interesting novel, one that takes me to a place that I did not have an experience of, or lets me look into the mind of someone I didn't appreciate before. So I just recently read a fantastic novel called God, I've forgotten the name. It's by Meg Mason, and it's about narrated by a woman who's mentally ill, very seriously mentally ill. And it's a great, great novel. And it manages to be funny at the same time. And it you know, gave me an experience that, you know, a secondhand experience, but an experience I didn't have before. So that for me is a great novel as well.
Thank you for that. Osman, we'll come back to you now.
Yeah, no, I think they've all said it. I think it really is a very individual experience, as Moni says. So I would say, you know, a great novel depends on the person, how the book sort of resonates with them. And I would agree about the feeling thing, but I would say it's a really great novel one that you're still thinking about, or you still think about a week later. I think, you know, like I think that's, or a bit sometime later, like that feeling as you reflect back on it sort of comes back in some form or the other. And I don't know what the half-life is supposed to be of these novels or anything like that, but I think that's really it. It's not just, I think a lot of books sort of engage you while you're reading them, but I think very few books really make you sort of have that feeling, you know, a week or two or even a month after you've read them. So that would be sort of, I think, my personal litmus test experience for a great novel.
So we spoke about, you know, having readers, having a community, and we'll start with you, Zain, because I know that you're starting something, you know, in the near future that is going to be sort of a community of readers and somebody who can critique your work. Do you currently have a set of friends, literary people? And because, you're the only one based in Pakistan and we are sort of talking about Pakistani writing and publishing, who is your biggest critic? And do you have a community of readers already in place when you write your first draft or when you write your short story and you need a pair of eyes on it?
Biggest critic is probably my agent, who has destroyed two absolutely terrible novels of mine. So that is, I really appreciate her for that. They were stopped in the process of hopefully never being written again. In terms of having a community, I don't really have a writerly community, but I have people in my life who are readers, not writers. And I think that's who I want to read my work. I don't want writers to read my work as much as I want readers to read my work. And again, it's like my brother reads everything I've written. Now my wife reads everything I've written. And they're not writers, but they read. So it's always good to hear, okay, so, you're from here, the story is about here, what do you think? So that's really the people, those are really the people I turn to. In terms of like having a writerly community, yeah, so I've been thinking about this since I started teaching at Habib, because when these students would come up to me and they're like, oh, we want to do this and we want to be MFAs and we want to do that. And why? Like, I was always very curious, like, why do you want to be writers? Or why do you want to, why is the MFA this thing where everyone's like, I will apply to an MFA and I will become a writer. And I was like, wait, what's happening? And a lot of the time, the MFA is a lottery. They get like thousands of applications a year and they take 3 people, and unless you are, as Moni said, a South Asian writing about deep stuff, like deep issues and deep things, you're probably not going to get in. Like the mermaid story from Kimardi is not going to make it there because that's not what they're after. So yeah, I really, I was like, okay, I can try and make that community, or I can try and find one for myself, but I couldn't find it. So I was like, why, I might as well do something. So I just decided to do something. It wasn't that difficult, really. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of kind of effort to start something, I think, but really once you do it, it's pretty easy. I'm a very organized person in life, which I kind of blame my dad for. But so I think that's those two things, the fact that I wanted to create a community for people, and the fact that I feel that with my job and with everything else that I do, I've learned how to organize a community. I think that's just kind of what led me to starting. It's called the workshop, and it's just going to start with courses, and then kind of, hopefully have people come in again and again over several months, and just simulate that MFA experience without people having to go through that particular process or go through that system. I mean, an MFA is great if you want to teach and want to get a degree for teaching, but everything else is, you can get that at home. Just you have to be surrounded by good people.
Osman, do you have a community? Do you have friends, readers, writers who sort of give you feedback or critique?
Do we have friends? This is a very personal question here. No, look, I think yeah, I mean, I do have a community of sort of or groups of people who are readers, in terms, and I would sort of approach them at different times. But yeah, and because it is a lot of work to be a reader and sort of especially reading sort of early drafts and things. So I think expand from like how close the people are to me generally as well, and then you've got to be careful because there's all these other dynamics. So Zain, when you say your wife is one of your early readers, my wife is as well, and I often wonder sometimes whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, or what how that works. But no, it absolutely, I think, is very helpful because you're so close to it. You can't really see it sometimes, and so it's really helpful to get the feedback from someone you trust, and someone who's sort of a gifted writer themselves. In terms of sort of critic, I think, I don't know if I feel like this is experience a lot of writers feel. I mean, obviously we get sort of feedback from other people and everything, but I think about 1/3 of the way through any new project, I think the biggest sort of critic is myself, because I think somehow, every sort of noun, subjective clause, and everything else is sort of questionable. And I sort of lose all faith and confidence in everything that's sort of coming together. And I just have to remind myself that, it gets better and then sort of pass on through. But I've heard sort of many authors have this sort of point where you're past the beginning and you're past the excitement of something new and novel, but you're not quite through the halfway point or close to the end. And I think that part where you're sort of not really sure if it's going to come together, even though it has come together in the past, I think is when a lot of the self-doubt sort of creeps in. But yeah, I think it's absolutely essential in terms of sort of broadly having a community and people to support you and read and give you honest feedback along. And the feedback is often just things that we discussed earlier, things like, I don't understand this, or it's boring is actually something that's really useful, but I think most people find it hard to say, but that's what you actually need. Or actually, this is great, I wouldn't change this bit. I think those 3 bits, just how it feels to read something, is the kind of feedback that I'm talking about, rather than this is how you should change it, which I think is probably what Zain's talking about, also getting readers rather than writers, because you don't want someone to tell you how to change it, you just want to know how it's landing.
Moni?
I joined a book club about 15 years ago. And at the time I did it because I liked the women who were doing it, who were members. It's a very small, very casual book club. But there's not that small, it's about 8 people. But none of them were at that time professional writers. And I joined for 2 reasons. Because, as I said, they were people I liked, and I liked spending time with them. And I thought once a month I would love to see these people. But the second was because they, the process of choosing a book is not up to me every time. I can only, when it's my turn to recommend a book, I can offer a suggestion. But otherwise, I get to read things that I would normally not pick off a shelf. Or I might, but it's not something that is determined by me. And that was very interesting to me, to read widely things that I wouldn't normally read. But over time, I discovered, in fact, for me, the great thing about this book was that I was interacting very closely with people who are readers, and not just of my work, but of work, and to hear their opinion on what engaged them, what they enjoy, what they dislike, what they find dull, has been enormously informative. I have to say, I keep it at the forefront of my mind when I'm writing, but I think it is there in my subconscious, all that feedback that I get. And also, I belong to a group of writers, and we just meet, on Zoom once a month, or chat about the difficulties we are having, or which is a good agent, or how do you get your book out? It's been published, but it hasn't been noticed. How do you look? All those kind of things that writers sort of worry about, and also reading each other's drafts. And I give them my stuff. I also give a friend of mine from the book a draft, because she's just I say just to read. She's a very canny reader. She's a civil servant by profession, but she is a very good reader. So yeah, I use these people. Their help is enormously useful, and I'm deeply grateful for them.
Thank you so much, Moni, Osman, Zain. It has been a wonderful conversation. I wish we could carry on. There were a couple more things that I wanted to ask and discuss, but perhaps another panel. Thank you, Sabine, for having us all, and thank you for your time.
Thank you
so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
For this.
Thanks, Sabine.
Thank you so much. Up next, we have another amazing panel titled Illustrated Resistance. So stay tuned.